virtual he'll visit. Okay, so David just started the recording. Great. Okay, so thank all of you who are live with us today. I need to remind everybody that we had this call scheduled back in May. If you looked at the original recruitment document, this call was scheduled. So I'm so glad so many of you paid attention and made yourself available. David is recording it, and there will be a link in case you want to study further what we walk through. So a couple of announcements to everybody. I hope you watched today the AMD briefing, the COVID conversation, your own videos, your colleagues' videos. If not, all of that's going to remain up there. You can watch it at your leisure if you'd like to. As you notice, there's an electronic dossier booklet on the site too, with your picture and your abstract. And for those of you that have gotten RPB awards, it even acknowledges that. David has sitting on his desk 28 envelopes, and he has a hard copy souvenir dossier booklet for each of you to put in your files. And David, you're sending that to all their home addresses, I believe?
Yes, that's all we had for them, yes.
Great, great, okay, good. So expect that, I don't know, with the mail, who knows, a week or two, but it's a hard copy souvenir dossier booklet. Please hold on to it. They become very valuable with age. I hope everybody appreciated their videos. And one thing I'm going to say to everybody is that, you know, and Arshana and I were talking about this, that, you know, you're getting many things out of this. And one of those is a professionally edited video, you know, but you get out of it what you put into it. As you saw, for many of you, Jose grabbed out of his very extensive library of images, or he created images for you. And I have to give kudos to my good buddy, Herr Dr. Stefan Kurtenbach, who actually filmed himself in the laboratory and was really good B-roll. So Jose's not here, Herr Dr. Kurtenbach, but he wanted me to acknowledge the B-roll you provided him.
Perfect.
Great. So everybody, we are already working on a journal version of the COVID article. And I've written a 4-page outline, and our science writer has already watched the raw Zoom video, the 30-minute video, and we're going to be having a call Friday to basically settle in on the themes and topics. Is Jared Harmon with us today? Okay.
Hey, yes.
Yeah, he's there.
Hey, so Jared, you're a good example. We're probably going to follow up with you one-on-one to talk a little bit about the example you gave about learning a little bit more about public health more broadly. So okay. Don't be surprised if I or Miriam Davis follow up with you for the journal article to make sure that we are not misquoting one of the things coming out of, one of the positive things coming out of COVID. So great. Jose, you're here. Do you want to say hello to everybody? Come on, Jose, real quick over here. So everybody, here's Jose. He's been sleeping for 18 hours, I understand. So just say hello to him. Go ahead.
Just one second. Hey, everybody. Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
How's everybody? Hey, Stefan, all good? Yeah. So thank you for your video. Your 40 seconds of lab work was really good and key to cover that part of your explanation on that portion of the video. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
So to everybody, I just want to say just hello, hi, thank you. I hope that you are not disappointed at all, because that was, you know, I was very, very busy. And as you can imagine, only 1 hour of filming with AMD plus the COVID conversation, plus the 28 videos, I just slept little, very little for the past week. So, but thank you so much. And I hope that there is no complaint on any of the videos.
Okay, thanks, Jose.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, great. Okay, so what's going to happen now is we're going to move into the meat of this call because you've all gotten appointments for tomorrow, and we want to walk through all of that. David has sent you multiple times now a outline, a PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to put that on the screen and walk through that because that's going to be the training document. And as David's getting that set up, I'm going to let you all know that tomorrow is a really important day on Capitol Hill. Okay, great. Okay, so can everybody see that? And also, if you've got any chat questions, please send them to me, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so did everybody look at this PowerPoint and the 3 documents that accompanied it? The position paper, the why vision research funding is vital, and what I call the red screaming chart of the history of NEI funding. Did you all look at this prior?
Yes.
Okay, good. So
Yes.
let's move on, David. Next slide.
I'm trying. There we go.
Okay, great. Okay, so you're told all your life never to be selfish or self-absorbed. It doesn't always work with everybody, but tomorrow is about you. It's about you as an emerging vision scientist. Some call you early stage investigators, or some call you early career scientists. Whatever wording you use, you have cachet, and particularly on Capitol Hill. Some of these staffers have never met with or spoken with an emerging vision scientist or an early stage investigator in that regard. So I think it's important that you, as you introduce yourself and say who you are, indicate to them that you're participating in this emerging vision scientist program, and your virtual meeting with them is part of this program. And you can acknowledge this is your first time speaking with a Capitol Hill staffer. So just open yourself up and create that rapport and let them know that you don't do this on a daily basis. You're doing science and you're trying to find cures and treatments for blindness and various eye conditions. Now, you got to be careful though. You can't spend the whole time talking about yourself. Again, this is why I did that 2-3 minute elevator speech, because you're going to have to walk through your research very quickly with them, because you want to get to the meat of the messaging that we're going to talk about in a second here. Obviously, I think the Hill was also interested in if COVID had any impact on your research. And I know if Patrick Mayo's on the line, I know it had a big impact on his research, and I kind of paraphrased, probably set his research back 10 years. But for some of the others of you, you could acknowledge that, yes, you were thrown challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic, but you have worked around those by doing X, Y, and Z, or you got a new grant, or you got some publications done. So I think it's important to let the staff know that. You may have only 20 minutes for your virtual visit. So you got to think ahead to time that. So, a minute sort of introducing yourself and getting in that information that you're an emerging vision scientist, a minute or 2 on your research and why it's important, where you kind of stand, are you a postdoc, are you a clinician that's got an established practice, but you're researching in addition to that. So give a context for who you are, and build it up such that then you can move to the actual messaging about what we want to get across on the Hill tomorrow. The next slide, David. Okay, so you may have been reading a lot of the headlines about what's going on, and we'll get into that. But again, as you saw from your schedule, whoops, your virtual visit may be through a direct call, a conference line, a Zoom call, a Zoom for Government call. Do exactly what you're told in your schedule to do. Sometimes the staff may be a little confused. No fault on our part, but sometimes most of the visits go as planned. Occasionally there's a hiccup. Most of the time that's from somebody on the Hill that, you know, the dog ate the conference call number or something like that. Most congressional staff are still working from home. I don't think they're disconnected from the process per se, but definitely those that work for key committees on the Hill are really in touch with what's going on with the funding. And those key committees are the Appropriations Committee. Those are the people that work on funding the government. And then authorizing committees. For example, House Energy and Commerce and Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee that has authorizing jurisdiction over the NIH. So let's talk about where we are on the FY 2022 appropriations process. So the House has passed a Labor, Health and Human Services, and Education spending bill with increased NIH NEI funding, which we're supporting in our advocacy. And those numbers are in your position paper. They're also in one of the upcoming slides. The Senate has not yet acted on 11 of the 12 spending bills. So since Congress has not finalized funding, they are now working on what's called a CR, or continuing resolution, which will fund the government when fiscal year 2022 starts on October 1. But the trouble with the CR is it funds the government at the FY 2021 level, meaning no increases as they sort of figure out what they're going to do with appropriations. So for example, the National Eye Institute can't spend in any one month under the CR more than what they spend in the similar month in fiscal year 2021. What does that mean? Well, it definitely means they can't start new programs, but there might be grants, and for those of you that submitted RO1s, there might be new grants that are reviewed, approved by the National Advisory Eye Council, but they can't fund because they don't have the funding to do it because of this limitation on how much they can spend in any month during this what we call the CR, the continuing resolution. So just earlier today, the House of Representatives issued its draft continuing resolution that would fund the government in fiscal year 2022 at the fiscal year 2021 level, and that would be in effect until December 3rd, meaning that they're buying time for the House and the Senate to proceed in the rest of the appropriations process, get their bills together in what's called conference, and pass a final funding bill for each of the 12 bills that they have to fund the government with. Now, one of the problems is that you may have heard, and you'll see in headlines, that the Democratic leadership, in addition to having this continuing resolution, have as part of it funding for Afghanistan refugees, hurricane relief, and a suspension of the debt limit. And so it's not what we call a clean CR. It's got other things associated with it. And those other things are what many Republicans' offices may say why they're concerned with this continuing resolution, because it just doesn't fund the government into FY 2022 until December 3rd. It also has funding for other programs that the Republicans may not like. So I go through this because, some of the staffers are kind of know-it-alls. So they might be rattling off, well, we got all this stuff going on the Hill, and, a CR issued yesterday, and blah, 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 blah. And, my member of Congress doesn't support it, blah, blah, blah. And so I wanted you to be aware of what they're going to be talking about. Now, we'll talk a little bit about later about why we're concerned about these continuing resolutions and why it's important for Congress to act expeditiously to finalize FY 2022 appropriations. So please, David, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, advance one more. Okay, so I don't expect you to remember all these numbers. And remember, you will have this in front of you during your call, but this is a history of what the final funding was for NIH and NEI in 2021, what our request was for 2022, what the president's budget said, and what the House Appropriations Committee put forward, which was passed by the entire House. And as I said, the Senate is not yet taken any action. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out to you is that complicating NIH appropriations this year is the proposal for the creation of the Advanced Research Project Agency Health, or ARPA-H. This is this would be an entity that would be involved in the rapid translation of research to treatments and therapies, kind of like what happened with the COVID vaccine. It's modeled somewhat on the Defense Advanced Project Research Agency, or DARPA. Now, as you see, President Biden in his budget proposal wanted to fund ARPA-H at $6.5 billion over 3 years. In the House bill, they would fund ARPA-H at $3 billion over 3 years, so about half the amount that the president proposed. And they said that it would only be funded if their colleagues that are authorizers, the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the Senate Health Committee, authorized the creation of an ARPA-H. Why am I going into detail on this? For two reasons. So that if a staffer says ARPA-H, you know what they're talking about. Number two, we have not endorsed ARPA-H. Instead, we have acknowledged it being proposed, but what we have said is that do not fund ARPA-H while not adequately funding base NIH funding. So if you look at the House number there, you'll see that of the $49.4 billion in their bill for NIH, $46.2 billion would be for NIH base funding. Why is that important? It's important because to be able to give increases to the individual institutes and centers like the National Eye Institute, and in fact, the House bill proposes a 5% increase to all the institutes and centers at NIH, which is about 2.4% biomedical inflation plus 2.6% growth. It's important that they have adequate funding to provide that increase for the institutes and centers, as well as for all the other programs that NIH has to fund, many of those required by Congress. For example, under the 21st Century Cures Act, the Cancer Moonshot, the Precision Medicine Initiative, the Brain Initiative. So I wanted to give you an idea that, again, a staffer may bring up ARPA-H, and they may say to you, well, does your organization support ARPA-H? And what you can say is that, well, no, the vision community has not come out in support of ARPA-H. And one of the reasons why is we want to make sure that there is adequate NIH-based funding of $46.2 billion before an ARPA-H is created. And in fact, this is going to drag on for a while with regarding to ARPA-H, because now there's House Energy and Commerce bill that would create an ARPA-H, but not house it in NIH. So a lot of that detail needs to be worked out. That's why we haven't gone on record at this point of endorsing ARPA-H. I've written position papers and other things and submitted them to the Capitol Hill, but we just haven't endorsed ARPA-H this time.
But
Okay.
just as a question, I thought the 46.2 billion, they are approved, are they not?
No, no. Let me explain the process. The House passed its bill, but the Senate has to pass its bill, and then the House and Senate conference their bills together, and then each the House and Senate has to pass that conferenced bill. So this is why we're having a continuing resolution, because nothing's been finalized yet at this point.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, there's a question here. How would a government shutdown, failure to raise the debt ceiling affect the FY 2022 budget continuing resolution and ultimately NEI grants? Well, anything that's going to slow down the appropriations process, like I said, is going to keep this a continuing resolution or even a second continuing resolution in place. And the longer a continuing resolution is in place, then the agencies have to operate at the fiscal 2022, at the fiscal 2021 level and not be able to start up new programs. So that was one of the questions there. Okay, so here's Hill messaging. And there's a lot to try to get across here, and you're probably not going to be able to say all of it. So you got to be kind of on your feet, being able to react to what the staffer says. So as I said earlier, identify yourself as an emerging vision scientist, early stage investigator, whatever terminology, and quickly say what your research is. You've said it enough in your phone call with me in your film to do it very quickly, and where you are in your career stage and why NIH, NEI funding is so critical to you and your career pathway. You can, acknowledge, yes, indeed, I know Congress is dealing with a lot. Remember, I haven't even mentioned that they're dealing with the $1 trillion infrastructure package, as well as this $3.5 trillion health package. And all of this is in disarray right now because different factions of the Democratic Party can't agree to it. And then you have the Republicans sitting there saying, we don't want to spend on anything. So, a lot of the staffers are probably going to express some frustration. Recognize that Congress has been very great the last few years since FY 2016 with significant NIH and NEI funding increases. Recognize that the vision community supports the House bill, which has NIH overall funding at $49.4 billion. But as I said, most importantly, the NIH base funding at $46.2 billion, which will allow for inflation plus growth increases at the various institutes and centers, such as the National Eye Institute. It's important to keep bringing that back to the staffer that, that yes, the NIH is critical, but for you as a vision scientist, most of the funding for you and your R01s are going to come from the National Eye Institute. And as I mentioned, that base funding in the House bill of $46.2 billion would enable these 5% increases reflecting inflation plus growth. And we're going to show you in a red chart a little bit why that inflation plus growth is important. Let's move to the next slide. Thanks, David. Okay, Hill messaging part 2. And I alluded to this earlier. I'm sure they're going to talk about the continuing resolution. In fact, the House may be voting upon it tomorrow afternoon. The proposal came out today for the continuing resolution. It's got to go before what's called the House Rules Committee, which rules on whether it can go to the House floor to be passed. And so you might be in the thick of Hill action tomorrow on the House side with respect to queuing up or even voting on the continuing resolution. But as I mentioned, why is it important for Congress to expeditiously finalize FY 2022 appropriations? Because under these continuing resolutions, the agencies can't spend any more than the prior fiscal year. And again, that could delay grant awards. And I know from the COVID conversation, many of you submitted your first R01 grant applications. And it can prevent agencies from starting new programs. So it's better to finalize the FY 2022 appropriations. Hopefully there won't be this series of CRs, but some years they've gone into March or April of the next year. So that's why, all of us, including about 450 individuals on Thursday through the Rally for Medical Research, are going to be also echoing to the same offices the fact that let's get these appropriations finalized. Let's not drag it on with this continuing resolution. Now, one last thing, and this is optional because I understand there's not enough time, but if it does come up from a staffer, well, you talked a little bit about the COVID impact on you. Does your community still think that emergency supplemental funding for NIH research recovery is important? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. So if it does come up, you can request that Congress provide emergency supplemental funding for NIH research recovery, such as the bipartisan RISE Act, which is in both chambers. So the RISE Act is the Research Investment to Spark the Economy Act. It's a House bill and a Senate bill, not finalized yet, but it would authorize $25 billion in funding to make up for what was lost during the pandemic across all the scientific agencies, government agencies that do science, including $10 billion for NIH. And why is that important? Because just as recently as May, at a Senate hearing, the NIH director, Dr. Francis Collins, estimated that the COVID-19 pandemic cost the NIH, and when I mean the cost the NIH, and I also mean its awardees and scientists, about $16 billion cost to the biomedical research enterprise, which is about $6 billion greater than the $10 billion he estimated a year ago in July. So although the RISE Act is not really there in terms of 16 billion, at least it would have 10 billion for NIH research recovery. And of course, that's another opportunity for you to mention the impact of COVID. So let's move on to the next slide. So why is an inflation plus growth increase important for all the institutes and centers, including the NEI? Well, if you look on the chart on your left, which is the blue and red, you see that although the NEI's budget has grown since the sequester back in 2013, it's just been inching up. And in fact, if you take a look over the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fiscal years, you'll see that the average annual growth rate is only 2.1%, which is less than the average annual biomedical inflation rate of 2.7. So if your growth is less than inflation, then you're losing. And as you see in the chart on your right, that is the purchasing power chart. And that's through, I believe, FY 2020. And you see that in the blue lines, if you draw a straight line over, you'll see that NEI's purchasing power is less than that than in fiscal year 2012, the year before all this deficit reduction and sequester took place. So a staffer may say, oh, come on, that can't be real. We've given so much to NIH through the years. Well, yeah, NIH has gotten 7 or 8% increases, but that hasn't always trickled down to the increases for the institutes and centers. Some years, institutes and centers have only gotten a 2% increase, which is less than biomedical inflation. So over the past several years, yes, Congress has done what it could for NIH and of course for the institutes and centers, but there was such a backlog, you might say, in funding that we're still trying to make up for what was done during the sequester in the early 2010s. Now, I want to stop here. And David,
Yes.
please feel to chime in. We had given our position paper, our why vision research is vital fact sheet, and this red screening chart as a PDF to Dina to share with the congressional offices.
Correct.
So not every office necessarily has asked to receive this but she has offered these background papers up to the offices, correct?
Yes, I believe that's what she did. Yes.
Yes, that was our understanding when we all spoke about a month ago. So, but the trouble is we can't guarantee the person you're meeting with has these. So if you have the PDF, you can always share it with that staffer afterwards. And of course, you want to make sure to get their email address. But we did, Dina did try to share the 3 most important documents that really justify the request with these congressional offices. Sometimes you can't force documents on an office that won't take them.
They actually, everyone should already have in their schedule, I included the email of the staffer they're meeting with. So you can ask for it to confirm it, but you should have that in the schedules that I sent out earlier today.
And yeah, and you know, part of the following up and thanking them for their time is again, sending them that PDF that has these 3 most critical documents in it. Position paper, why funding vision research is vital, and what I call this red screening chart document. Okay, David, could you move to the next slide, please? So you see, we just talked about the red screening chart document. Now, this is the funding vision research is vital document. And I want to point out something very important in the first bullet. Several of you in your write-ups and in your films said that the annual cost of eye disease and vision disorders is $139 billion. Well, that was as of 2013, folks. And that was based upon the Prevent Blindness study. That study has a chart in it that extrapolates out all the way to 2050. And in year 2021, the cost is $177 billion. So don't understate that annual cost of eye disorders and vision impairment. It's, as of 2021, $177 billion annual cost, projected to grow to $717 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars by year 2050. And as you see, if you break it down per person in the United States, which is about roughly 330 million, that's only about $2.53 per person per year that we're spending on vision research. While just, you know, for example, the cost of treating a person that's blind or has low vision is about $7,000 per person per year. And of course, direct medical costs of vision disorders are the 5th highest. And of course, my organization did a survey in 2014 of Americans' attitudes about vision and vision loss, which was published in August of 2016 in JAMA Ophthalmology, and that Americans across all ethnic and racial groups fear loss of vision more than loss of any other sense or limb. And if you compare it to, let's say, getting cancer or getting HIV or Alzheimer's, it's right up there. And it's number 1 or 2, depending upon the ethnic group. You can read the study for yourself. So I always tell folks, pick one really good fact and hammer away at that. And if you want to talk about the annual cost of vision disorders, $177 billion is the number in 2021. Personally, I add to that and say, and that's going to grow to $750 billion annually by year 2050. Again, I do this every day. So instead of saying 717 billion, I say $750 billion because that people, pick up on that $1 trillion level. So let's move to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let David talk now. So David, can you go through all this, please? And add anything you'd like to.
Yeah, thanks. Just so everyone knows, we're still getting used to doing these sort of virtual visits. The Hill is still probably getting used to it even after a year, because again, sometimes they're in the office, sometimes they're home. So be prepared for anything. Change, as I said in the email today, the schedule I sent to you is as final as we could make it as of today. But scheduled visits do often change right up until the very last minute. So if your schedule says you're done by 1 o'clock, don't assume that your rest of the day is free, because we could be contacting you 12:30 saying, hey, your 1 o'clock visit's been postponed till 3 o'clock. So please leave your day free until you've actually completed all 3 of your visits or your meetings, because the Hill is very busy, as Jim has just detailed. So the schedule is very much subject to change, even at the very last minute. So having said that, as I said, sit down, get your materials together, whatever notes you have in front of you, whatever materials that we sent to you want to refer to, whether it's this PowerPoint or the position paper, have it in front of you for the visit so you don't have to scramble for it. As Jim, it's most of your calls, your meetings are direct phone calls or conference calls. Some are Zoom, some are Skype, some are Microsoft Teams. If they are video calls, please have an appropriate background. Please don't have your child running around playing behind you. If you have a pet, certainly you don't want him jumping up on the computer, your desk in front of you. We don't want to waste the time or distract the staffers' attention. We want them focused on you. So please have a very sedate, calm meeting space to have your call. Stay on the message. Jim just gave you a lot of information. Don't feel you have to share it all. Share the few points you're comfortable with discussing. Please get our main ask in, but if you want to talk about the incidents or costs, whatever you feel most comfortable talking about, talk about. Describe your research. Describe how your research will improve health, make diagnoses better, advance science, whatever you're working on. Make sure you describe your work and the support you've gotten from the NEI and why it's so important. And why it's important that Congress continue to support the National Eye Institute. Offer to send them the documents we've shared with you. Don't try to do it during the meeting. Just say, if you want, I'd like to send you some supporting materials. You can email them afterwards. As I said a few minutes ago, you should have the emails from all your staffers you're meeting with, but the staffer could change. That happens up on the Hill in real visits. It certainly could happen in a virtual visit. Someone else may show up on it saying, oh, so-and-so got called into a meeting with the senator, I'm taking over. So while you should have the emails for the staffer that you're meeting with, you may not. So you can ask for it and offer to send the materials to them after the Zoom.
David,
Yes.
David, I've gotten several questions here, so let's deal with it right now.
Okay.
For those of us in multiple EVS participants, like Senate meetings, do you have recommendations on how to organize our message? For example, should we coordinate our message and each hammer a point? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's obviously much easier to do those types of visits in person because you can talk outside the room before you enter. So for those of you from California, Maryland, Michigan, Ohio, certainly if you want to exchange, you should all have each other's email. If you want to exchange a few emails or maybe get on the Zoom a few minutes early or the conference call a few minutes early, and try to work out how you best want to handle it, that would be great. And as I indicated to our California people, you may have, hopefully, Alex Muntz from New Zealand joining you. We'd certainly like him to offer a perspective on how the National Eye Institute supports not just US-based researchers, but international researchers, how it really is the preeminent international vision funding research institution in the world. So yeah, so that's a good question. Certainly try to, if you can coordinate before time, that would certainly make it a lot easier on all of you, and make sure the visit goes much smoother.
And David, let me just add, I was in a meeting with Senator Markey's staff, Massachusetts, with 4 folks in person about 3 years ago from Mass Eye and Ear Scapins. And, you know, one did ROP, one did diabetic retinopathy, one did AMD. And each of them took like a minute and said, well, you know, I deal with vision issues early in life, like retinopathy of prematurity. And they said, you know, basically, you know, I deal with, you know, babies. And then the next person said, well, you know, I deal with diabetic retinopathy, you know, the most common condition in the working age population. And then the AMD person said, well, you know, I'm mostly dealing with older individuals. So without any training, they just automatically just kind of did this fun little thing. And then they talked about, well, you know, for each of them, where are they in their stage of their career, and why, you know, NIH, NEI funding. Boy, we're getting a lot of chat questions. I just wanted to add too, David, give me a second here. It says, is it a good idea to bring up how low the funding rate is and how long it takes new investigators to get NIH funding? Yes. I mean, you can't repeat that enough. And in fact, you know, what is it? The age for first grant for bench researchers is about 42 years old. And I believe clinician scientists is about 46 years old. And yeah, there's been a lot of initiatives from NIH to lower that age, but unfortunately, there hasn't been, it hasn't had that big of an impact. David, also, a question here. What about members of Congress who say that, well, you know, if we give NIH more money, they may not be using it properly. We all know who these are in Congress. They're the naysayers that are always complaining about something about funding medical research, that, you know, it uses embryonic stem cells, or you know, it helps support labs in China that created the whatchamacallit virus. You know, you may get, you know, an office that's not going to be friendly in that regard, but, you know, you just got to say, well, you know, I respect the congressman's opinion, but I can tell you, you know, in my research, you know, I'm going to be restoring vision and giving productive lives and all that kind of thing. So, you know, remember, you don't always have to answer the question that they pose to you. You can also get across the point you want to make. So David, I'll come back to you.
It's unlikely that you would get challenged like that. It doesn't happen very often. The fact is, every state gets money from the NIH. Almost every congressional district, certainly that represent where your institution is, get money from the NIH. So they recognize how important NIH funding is for supporting the academic institutions in their states and districts. Yeah, you may get the a comment about whether the NIH supported the creation of the China flu. We need more investigation, blah, blah, blah. You can just say, deflect it, as Jim said. That's not my area of research. It doesn't have anything to do with the area that I work on, the diseases I'm trying to cure. So I'm really not informed enough to take an opinion on that. So just deflect it, stay on point, and move on. So once you're wrapping up the meeting with them, it could go 5 minutes, could go 10, could go 30. Again, when these are on the Hill, depends what time of year these visits are going, how busy the Hill is. The staffers are often very busy, they can't meet for very long, or they're kind of chilling and they'll talk forever for half an hour. So we just don't know how busy the staffer that you're meeting with will be tomorrow. So just be prepared. You know, you won't have body language to take cues from to know when they're getting ready to end the meeting. So just get through your talking points, ask them if they have any questions. And if the meeting seems to be wrapping up, thank them for their time. Offer to host the member of Congress or senator or themselves, the staffer himself or herself, as a visitor at your lab. We do get lab visits out of these lobby days. 1 a year or so, I would say, is about how often, but it does happen. So offer to host them at your lab when things get back to normal. Offer to serve as a resource for them. Very often, members of Congress, I was a former staffer, get emails and letters and phone calls from constituents saying, my child has X, my spouse has this, I don't know where to go. The staffers will often say, oh, I know a researcher or a doctor who works on that back in the district or back at the university. I'm going to send them or contact that person and see if they can help this person out. So offer to serve as a resource. Anything comes out of the meetings, any questions the staffer asks, any unusual or odd comments or questions, write them down, share them with Jim and myself. We will follow up on any questions. If you get a question you can't answer, don't try to answer it. Don't try to wing it. Don't try to fake it. Just say, you know what? I don't have that information, but I will have someone contact you who does have that information. So write it down, send it to me, and send it to Jim, and we will follow up on that. Follow up with an email to the staffer, thanking them for their time. I'll share some language with you the next day or so. You don't have to respond right away. You can send it later this week or even early next week. Just some basic language, thanking them for their time. If you talked about something that you have in common, you both went to that university or whatever, say, I enjoyed talking about X, and I appreciate you listening to my concerns. To reiterate, this is our ask for the NAI and NH for this year. So we'll have that language for you, but we definitely want you to follow up with them. Social media. Jim and I are a bit old fogies when it comes to social media, but we know the younger folks are a bit more comfortable with it. Please feel free to post on your social media links to your personal videos, to the web story we're going to post. Just post anything you want that you're comfortable with on social media. You can tag, our hashtag is NAEVR Advocacy, one word, NAEVR Advocacy. So please feel free to tag us. And we, as it says, finally, we will post a story about this on our website, on Facebook, and in our next contributor report, which is like our newsletter to our membership community. So, and Arvo will probably be doing the same. So we do get full value out of these activities, these visits. So it will live on long after tomorrow.
David, there's several questions here about people aren't understanding. Are they supposed to be calling? Will somebody be calling them? Could you explain that?
All the visits, almost all the visits, you are calling them. I think there's 2 visits where the staffer will call you. Almost all of them is, if it has a phone number and a passcode or just a phone number, it's you calling them at that exact time. Don't call too early. Try not to be late. If it's a Zoom meeting or Skype, get on at the right time. Don't be surprised if the staffer is late. Don't be surprised if you get on the conference call and the staffer is not there. Staffers' schedules are in flux constantly. So if anything does arise, you give it 15, 20 minutes. Then I would say you can contact me. I'll be at my desk all day by email. Or you may hear from me or Dina saying, hey, the staffer let us know they're running late. But no, almost all of the visits are initiated by yourselves, by the EVSs. I think there's 2 where the staffer is going to call you. And I indicated that staffer will call so-and-so on cell phone. So that's why your cell phone numbers came in very handy, because a couple of the calls, they're calling you. So if you have any questions about your schedule, please email me and I'll clarify. But those numbers, you are calling them in all those cases.
And for everybody, I know some of you are asking me to send you things. Please ask David. I am going to be out of the loop. I'm going on a 72-hour psychiatric hold after dealing with everybody. And so work through David. David's the brains behind the Advocacy Day. He knows the schedules. He works with Dina, our scheduling consultant. I don't do that. I was involved in the films and all that other stuff. Real quick, Brian Thompson, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Brian, you just did this in February as part of the Arvo Advocacy Day. And I want to, number one, acknowledge that I asked Brian to be part of the EVS program this year because he did such a fabulous job in his visit, which was with the office of Rosa DeLauro, which heads up all of House of Appropriations. And Brian sent me probably the most content-rich stream of consciousness email about the conversations he had with Blumenthal's office, with Rosa DeLauro's office. And Brian even asked me, he said, well, you know, DeLauro's staffer said that she's really in favor of congressional hearings that also include all the institute and center directors. Is that true, Jim? And I actually got back to him and said, yeah. I said, you know, Rosa DeLauro has mentioned several times now that she's kind of tired of hearing the same people testify, and she wants to hear from the institutes and centers that don't always get a voice on the Hill. Brian, could you give people any advice from you just having done this a few months ago on the visit?
I think be flexible, as David said. So I think it was, I think it might have been my conversation with Congresswoman DeLauro's staffer that was actually delayed quite significantly. And so you really, I think, being flexible, remaining open, quick on your toes is important. And I think too, you having your talking points, but not being too rigid as well, which goes back to that flexible. You know, because as much as you want to steer the initial part of the conversations, there's going to obviously be some give and take here with the staffer, depending on where they want to steer the conversation. So, for example, with you know, the staffer for Rosa DeLauro, you know, they were really familiar with the process and the funding process, and familiar with the Congresswoman's, you know, concerns at least. And so they were really advocating hard for us to show up, us being the eye researchers, to show up and to testify in front of Congress. And so, you know, I just was able to kind of stay flexible and quick on my toes and to respond with them, you know, in a way that wasn't rigid, so to speak.
And just to let you all know, there's some other folks on the call that have done the Arvo Science Communication Program in other years. I think most of you had done it in person. I think Brian was the only one that had done it virtually. But as David said, you know, if there's anything that an office brings up that you're not familiar with, admit to them you're not an expert on that. And, you know, don't try to answer a question you don't know the answer to. But if they raise some question or say, well, gee, you know, I don't really understand this red screaming chart, could somebody else explain it to me? Then when, as David said, when you send your stream of consciousness email, let us know let David know if that office is looking for someone to come back to them. For example, I couldn't believe this. A staffer said to one of our advocates, well, I don't know what bird pie is. Well, bird pie is the fancy word for biomedical inflation. It's the Biomedical Research and Development Price Index. A staffer didn't know what bird pie was, which is scientific inflation. And so, but our advocate got back to me and said, hey, you know, you might want to like give a definition to the staffer. They just weren't really familiar with this phrase bird pie. So we got back to them right away. So there is follow-up with offices that we do. Some of you have visits with chairs of committees, appropriators, authorizers. So there's a lot of really good visits here. Now, granted, you're with the staffer, but that means that usually the staffer is pretty on their toes and understands. Or a staffer may say, yeah, you know, you're not the only ones coming in here, you know, supporting the house number, or you're not the only ones coming in here asking for emergency supplemental funding for NIH. And that should make you happy if they validate the fact that you're not the only ones coming in. In fact, as I said, there's 420 25 people or so that are going to be having similar virtual visits on Thursday as part of the annual Rally for Medical Research. And over the years, we've typically been the day before or the day after the rally. So our messages completely complement the messages of the rally. Although the rally is all kinds of scientific disciplines, our very specific NEI message is really unique to us. David, I see you're doing a great job in getting back on the chat to people about the numbers and calls and things. Anything you want to say?
No, I think if you have any questions, just email me or directly either later today. I'll be out later this evening at my son's hockey practice, but I can respond to emails hopefully, or early tomorrow morning, I'll get back to you. But if there's a phone number by itself, a phone number with a passcode, you're calling in either the staffer directly, quite possibly on their personal cell phone if they're at home, or you're calling into a conference call system that we've set up for these visits, or that maybe some conference call systems, the Hill offices set up the call. So either way, unless it says staffer to call you, you are calling in. You're calling them directly or into a conference call. But any questions, just email me directly.
And so, you know, we have 61 or 62 visits tomorrow. And believe it or not, this is the first time this has happened and us doing it virtually. A couple of you have calls next week, just one with the staffer because somebody was not in the office this week. So that's kind of fun to think that, you know, our August group had will have contacts with 63 congressional offices. We've got a couple more minutes. Jared, you've done this on the Hill before. Any comments, Jared? Are you there, Jared?
Yeah, sorry. To echo what Brian said, I would just say kind of being flexible and fluid in the conversation. And for me personally, I kind of just take like a notebook out and kind of have a series of notes and talking points. That way, if I get caught off guard, I can, you know, just kind of make the next transition after I do my best to answer their question.
Yeah, and again, realize this is virtual, and unless you're on a Zoom call where they see you, you can have that position paper in front of you, or you can have those 2 pages of the PowerPoint that have, you know, the messaging spelled out for you there. Daisy, I believe you were an ARVO science communicator and have done this on the Hill, correct?
I was in Australia at the time, so I wasn't able to make it. So
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I
Well,
would have liked to, yeah.
Well, you did a great job in your movie and in the COVID conversation.
Thank you.
Edmund, you were on the Hill with ARVO, weren't you? Are you there, Edmund? Okay, well,
He was here earlier. I don't know.
yeah, those are the folks that I remember that have done this prior. So that's what David and I had for you. Let's open this up. Any other questions or comments, folks?
Can I ask a quick question? I'm
Yes.
just curious a little bit about sort of how does this fit into the staffers' day and what are they expecting from this call? Like, is this more of a conversation? They ask us questions, we answer. Are we expected to kind of come on strong and start sort of presenting and then they respond? I don't have a very good sense for sort of conversational dynamics of this. Or I guess one is just flexible.
Sure. Well, remember, most of these visits are with health staffers. You know, you're not typically meeting with somebody that's dealing with international trade or, you know, banking regulations. You're dealing with staffers that kind of deal with health issues every day. And these are smart cookies. You know, many of these folks are at night doing programs at Georgetown in public health or George Washington Law School. Some are going to be going to medical school. So don't underestimate these folks. You know, like I said, many of you are meeting with staffers that work for folks that are on appropriations or authorizing committees. So they're very knowledgeable. Most of them don't lord that over you. They realize you don't do this on a daily basis. And most of them, you know, are very respectful and they want to hear what you have to say, particularly since you're an early stage investigator. So I don't think you need, you know, to come on super strong, but you want to come across as being confident and and also very confident in the facts that you're telling them. So that's why it's important to, think about what you're going to say about yourself, your research, where you are in that continuum, and the need for NIH, NEI funding. And like I said, some fun fact about, the impact of, the economic cost of vision loss or whatever. And so make sure that, you have those talking points ready to go. And, most of these staffers do a conversational kind of thing. They'll be like, yeah, boy, I don't know where this continuing resolution is going to go. Or, wow, we got a lot to deal with in a short period of time. I mean, some of them become a little bit more philosophical. I will say, though, that since this is a Wednesday and a really busy day on the Hill, I think you're going to get less of that philosophical stuff than, let's say, on some of the ARVO lobby days that have been held on a Friday, not a busy Friday. So these offices will be busy tomorrow. Staffers will be monitoring what's going on, particularly if a vote starts on the continuing resolution. But again, I do encourage you to, let us know, if an office was particularly, negative about NIH funding, or like we said, if a staffer wanted a clarification on something, let David know, and we'll definitely follow up with those offices. And in fact, the Wisconsin person, is that Ramasa Chana? I will be following up with Tammy Baldwin's office on another issue next week. So I'm going to be using your name and the fact that you met with, I forget his name here. I think it's Brian Lupkin or something like that.
Brian Kaplan.
Yes, Kaplan. I'm going to be using that as a fun fact. So that's not for you to do anything about, but Baldwin's office has been amazing through the years. She's incredibly supportive, and she's on key committees of jurisdiction. So you'll find them lovely there.
Sounds good.
Okay, any other questions? I didn't check the chat recently here, but I don't see any more chats coming through. We didn't want to take more than an hour, folks. So again, this is your time if you want it. David, you're recording this. Are you going to send a link for the recording out to everybody, just so that even if they were on the call?
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
Yeah.
So that'll be easier then, because I know Edmund did have to drop off for clinical reasons, and Patrick Mayo had a family thing come up. So I'll just send it to everyone to make it easy.
And Roxana had to drop off too, so just send it to everybody. And it was
I'm going to stop recording now.
Was Margaret Reynolds on the call?
Nope, she did not, and she's not responded to any of my emails. But I'm going to stop. I'll stop the recording now.
Okay, thank you.